What if the moment you believed it was all over was exactly the moment it all really began? My name is Ethan Cole, and this is the story of the moment heaven said to me, "Not yet." That night, the sound of the monitor beside me began to fade. Each beep grew more distant until only a deep silence remained, a silence so alive it seemed to breathe. I felt the weight of my body lift. The hospital room dissolved into a soft golden light, warm as the embrace I had always longed for. For the first time, there was no pain, no fear, and only peace. There, enveloped in that immensity, I knew I was free, and from the depths of my soul, I asked for what I had desired most in my entire existence. "Please, let me stay." But then, it came a voice. It wasn't made of sound, but of presence. It didn't speak to my ears, but to my heart. And when she said, "Not yet," it was as if the entire universe had stopped to listen. In that instant, I realized that heaven wasn't denying me rest. It was offering me purpose. Something inside me opened, as if every tear, every mistake, and every lost love now had greater meaning. And that's why I'm here, to tell you what happened after heaven sent me back. Because sometimes God's "not yet" is the beginning of everything. If this story has already started to touch something inside you, then take a deep breath and stay with me until the end. Because what comes next could change the way you see life. Every detail of this experience carries a message. And if you're here, it's no coincidence. Perhaps the same heaven that told me "not yet" is trying to speak to you too. Before I continue, I want to ask you one simple yet powerful thing. Leave a like, because this makes this message reach more people who need to hear the same call. And subscribe to the channel to walk with me in each new revelation, in each new light. And tell me here in the comments, what part of your life do you feel like heaven isn't over yet? Write what comes from the heart. Maybe your word is the sign another soul is waiting to read today. My name is Ethan Cole, and before everything happened, I was just another man trying to survive the weight of everyday life. I was 47 years old, and it felt like I was carrying the world on my shoulders. I worked at a tech company, one of those places where the lights never go out and the clock seems to tick faster when you need to breathe. I woke up every day with the same thought: just one more day, Ethan, just one more. But deep down, I knew there was something broken in me a long time ago. My routine was a sequence of mechanical repetitions: cold coffee, traffic, emails, meetings, silence at home. I was surrounded by people, but I felt alone in a way that no text message or hug could resolve. My children no longer lived with me. The marriage had dissolved like mist after years of postponed promises. I told myself I was working to give them the best, but deep down, it was just fear of facing the emptiness of what I had left. Over time, the body began to scream what the soul had been whispering for years. The chest pains, the tremors, the sleepless nights. Doctors called it stress. I called it punishment. I remember the day I first walked into the hospital. The smell of alcohol, the cold sheets, the constant sound of the machines. It all felt like a rehearsed choreography, designed to remind me that life is fragile and temporary. By that time, I no longer believed in miracles. I spoke of God as if I were talking about a distant old friend, someone who once promised me something and never returned. I stared at the white ceiling of the infirmary and wondered if he still saw me, if he still remembered my name. People said faith moves mountains, but my faith could barely lift the lid on my pain. There were weeks of tests, comings and goings, medications, tubes, and promises of improvement. Each morning, hope mixed with the fear of not waking up the next. I saw the tired faces of the nurses, the pitying looks of the doctors, and inside me a silent desire grew. If it's going to end, let it end soon. It wasn't giving up. It was exhaustion. I didn't want to fight anything anymore, something I couldn't name. One early morning, the room was plunged into darkness. The window let in a thin line of streetlight, almost bluish. I was awake but too weak to speak. The beeping of the heart monitor was the only sign that I still existed. Beep, beep, beep. Each beat felt like a cruel reminder, you're still here. It was at that moment that I realized how silently heavy life can be. It's not the weight of tragedies that destroys us, but the weight of ordinary days, of words unsaid, prayers forgotten, the love we fail to show. I thought about my children. It had been so long since I'd said I love you without haste. I thought about my ex-wife, about how many times I'd chosen work over a simple dinner. I thought about the friends I'd stopped reaching out to, the promises I'd abandoned. Each memory came like a wave, washing away pieces of who I thought I was. And then I realized that the true weariness didn't come from the body, it came from the soul that had been crying out for rest for years and had never been heard. That morning I cried, not a cry of despair but of recognition, a cry that came from within, as if my heart had finally been given permission to break. No one saw, no one heard, just me and the distant sound of the machines. Beep, beep, marking the rhythm of my surrender. Just before dawn I felt something strange, a pressure in my chest, a pain that started out subtle and then spread. I tried to call the nurse, but no voice came. The world began to blur, and all that remained was a deep hum, as if the entire universe were breathing with me. The pain intensified, but with it came an inexplicable calm. It was as if something was telling me, "Don't fight, just let go." The lights in the room grew brighter, the ceiling seemed to recede, and my body lost its weight. I saw my own hands motionless on the sheet. I saw myself, but without fear. There was a strange familiarity in that moment, a sense of return. It was like arriving home after a long journey. The monitor sound stopped, the last beep echoed like the closing of a cycle, and then came silence. A silence so deep it seemed to have life, and it was in that silence that everything changed. The instant the sound ceased, time seemed to stop too. Everything solid dissolved into a kind of painless silence. It was as if the air itself had forgotten to vibrate. I was there, but not in the way I knew it. The body lying on the bed seemed like a memory, something I observed without urgency, without attachment. There was no fear, only a deep curiosity, a silent recognition. So that's it. That's how it ends. But I soon realized it wasn't ending. On the contrary, something inside me was beginning. It was as if an invisible veil had torn between two worlds, and on the other side, a space opened up, golden, pulsating, infinite. The first sensation was lightness, a lightness impossible to describe in human words. The weight of pain, memories, regrets, everything remained there, in the room, trapped in the body that now breathed on its own. What remained of me was pure consciousness, a living, awakened spark. I saw, or perhaps felt, particles of light swirling around me, as if the air had been filled with tiny stars. The hospital, the ceiling, the walls, the world, everything receded like a photograph slowly burning, and in its place a landscape appeared that seemed made of light and breath. It was golden, but not the metallic gold we know. It was something warm, soft, alive. Light came from all directions, and yet there was no shadow. I tried to figure out if I was dreaming, but I realized the dream was the life I had left behind. This was more real than anything I had ever felt. There was a sound there, not of voices, not of wind, a sound that seemed to come from within the light itself. It was like a melody without notes, an invisible chorus saying without words, "Are you at home?" And for an instant, peace was total. A peace that asked for nothing, that needed no explanation. I floated in this space, without ground, without sky, simply existing. Everything that defined me, my name, my age, my pain, began to dissolve. I was no longer Ethan Cole, the tired and regretful man. I was something greater, a pure consciousness steeped in love. But then, something began to shift, a sense of distance, as if the light were enveloping me, but also beckoning me deeper. Every fragment of me blended with that presence. I wanted to follow. I wanted to lose myself completely there. As I walked forward, I realized I wasn't alone. Luminous silhouettes appeared all around, some sharper, others just soft, almost transparent shapes. And somehow I knew who they were. They were familiar faces, people I'd loved, and others I'd never met in this life but recognized with my heart. There were no words between us, but there was complete understanding. They looked at me as if to say, "You made it this far." It was then that something even more intense happened. An energy, unlike anything else, began to pulse before me. It wasn't a defined figure, but a presence. It was as if all the light had a center, and that center called to me. And the closer I got, the more I felt a sweet force, a love so pure it ached with beauty. I wanted to surrender completely. I wanted to let that light swallow me, erase me, remake me. And it was at that exact moment that a memory crossed my consciousness, the world I left behind, my children still so young, the house where the silence was louder than any words, the promises I never kept. A conflict arose within me, Part of me wanted to dissolve into eternal peace, but another part, something deep, whispered, "You're not done yet." I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to fight anymore. I wanted to rest. I wanted to stay. That place was everything I'd ever sought. Love without fear, light without shadow. Then I spoke, not with my voice, but with my intention. "Please, let me stay. I don't want to go back." The answer didn't come immediately. The light only shone brighter, and for a moment, everything disappeared, including thought. I was just pure feeling, a flame fused with something much greater. And it was at that point that I began to realize something subtle. The light wasn't just light. It had consciousness. Itera, conscience. And this consciousness saw me. It saw me whole. Not the gestures nor the words, but the truth behind them. I felt my entire life unfold before me, not as a judgment, but as a loving reflection. Every act of kindness, every mistake, every word spoken and unspoken, all appeared not as memories but as living vibrations. It was like reliving the echo of every emotion I had evoked in others. I saw the tears I'd caused. I felt the pain I'd ignored. I heard the words I'd kept silent. And, at the same time, I saw the good I'd done without realizing it. Small forgotten gestures that in that place shone like constellations. This revelation didn't shame me. On the contrary, it freed me. I understood that everything I'd experienced, including the suffering, was part of an invisible thread connecting me to something infinitely greater. Meanwhile, the presence of the light grew closer. It was as if the very heart of the universe beat before me, and just when I thought I would be completely absorbed by it, something changed. The vibration grew deeper, almost gravelly, like thunder within the silence. It was at that moment that I realized the light wanted to say something, and even before a word was spoken, I knew. The answer to my plea came with the strength of a love indescribable. Not yet. The phrase didn't come from outside. It echoed within me, in every particle, in every memory, in every piece of my essence. It was as if the universe itself was saying my name. Not yet. Those two words held everything. Compassion, purpose, promise. They didn't pull me away from the light. They pulled me back toward life. I wanted to resist. I tried to stay, but a gentle energy began to pull me, like an invisible current. The light, once so close, began to recede, and as it receded, a new pain arose, the pain of leaving the paradise I had just known. I tried to fight, I tried to stay, but it was like trying to hold back the wind. And as I was carried back, the light whispered something I've never forgotten. "You will understand, trust me." And then everything began to fade. The glow, the silhouettes, the peace. All that remained was the memory of the warmth and the certainty that something inside me would never be the same. The current pulling me back lost some strength as the presence took another step forward, if steps even existed there. There was no definite form, but I knew where it was, as if my soul knew how to pinpoint the center of everything. The light didn't blind. On the contrary, it revealed. It revealed who I was before the guilt, before the fatigue, before I became just the employee, the absent father, the man pressed by deadlines and bills. The voice didn't come as a sound. It appeared as instant understanding, as if an entire meaning had been poured into me all at once, yet it remained soft, delicate, almost a whisper. "I have always been here." It was impossible to hold back. My conscious eyes, not my physical ones, filled with something like tears, but they were tears of light, warm, healing. I felt like a child again, without armor, without justifications. I asked wordlessly, "Why not yet?" And the answer brought a warmth that spread as if every fragment of my being were covered with an invisible blanket, because the love you found here needs to blossom there. The word "there" carried the weight of earth, the hospital, my children, the silent house, the friends I'd lost through lack of presence. It was as if heaven pointed to my life and said, "That's where my love needs to happen." I felt shame for a moment, not the shame that humiliates, but the shame that cleanses. I realized how many times I had traded presence for tasks, listening for ready-made answers, hugs for promises, for later. The presence with loving firmness showed scenes from my history, like someone opening windows to let the wind in. I saw myself arriving late. I saw myself avoiding conversations. I saw myself saying, "I love you," for fear of appearing weak. And at the same time, the light showed me tiny moments I hadn't even remembered. The time I held the elevator door for a lady and smiled. The short message I sent to a colleague who was grieving. The morning I left a note for my son in his backpack. "You are good, don't forget." Those moments right there shone brighter than any goal achieved, more than any bonus received. The voice expanded within me. What has value is not measured by clocks. I wanted to say I was tired. I wanted to explain that I tried, that life was heavy, that so much had slipped through my fingers. The presence listened without interrupting me, and her silence alone healed half of my defenses. When the urge to justify passed, only the truth remained. I failed. The word flew from me like a wounded bird, and the light received it without drama, without applause, without condemnation. Yes, it said, but you are more than your failures. That sentence was like a rising tide within, washing away old guilt, dissolving labels. I understood in that instant that forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is remembering without losing yourself. The voice rested on this understanding and added, "And there is someone who needs to hear this from you." My eldest son's face then appeared with painful clarity. I remembered the championship I'd lost because there wasn't enough time. I remembered when, still small, he'd asked me why I worked so hard, and I'd responded with numbers, as if numbers could soothe an 8-year-old's heart. The light touched the wound. It wasn't a throbbing touch, it was a touch that said, "Come back and say what you couldn't say. Come back and listen to what you couldn't hear." I wanted to take on this task right then and there, as if I could summon my son to that plane and resolve everything in a hug, but I understood that certain healings only happen in the density of earth, in the flesh that aches, in the time that demands repeated choices. "That's why not now," said the presence, "because love is a verb that needs day after day." I cried soundlessly, and yet the tears made music in the light. "I'm afraid of failing again," I confessed. The answer was tenderly firm. "You will fail, but this time you won't walk alone." Something opened, as if the space around me had a spiraling glow. I saw outstretched hands, people I hadn't yet met in person, but who were already connected to my mission. I saw a circle of support, serene faces, words I would still say, hugs I would still give, requests for forgiveness and offers of presence. The voice tied an invisible thread to it all. Purpose is not a solitary hero. Purpose is communion. My desire to stay there, still, enveloped in that impossible peace, still pulled me toward the center of the light, and the presence saw my struggle with a compassion beyond words. "You think peace is the absence of a task," it said, "but true peace is doing what you came to do, in the right time, with a whole heart." I remembered the hospital, the antiseptic smell, the metallic cold of the bed rails. "I don't know if I can bear to go back," I confessed. "You don't have to endure everything at once," the voice replied, "just the next step." At that moment, the light drew a path, not a map full of details, but a living, pulsating line that began here and ran through my life. I saw stations, asking my son for forgiveness, sitting with my brother on an ordinary afternoon and listening, unhurriedly, visiting the mother of a friend who had passed away, returning to that square where I promised myself I wouldn't return, and this time, staying until sunset, working fewer hours and making room for silence, playing the piano again, cooking a simple dinner and eating unhurriedly, learning to say no when my soul said no. I realized that mission wasn't a stage. Mission was a table. Mission was time to love. Mission was bringing the light from here to there in everyday life. The presence smiled, not with a mouth but with clarity, as this understanding matured. "You were waiting for a decree from heaven," it said. "I am handing you a daily routine." Something inside me laughed, a shy, relieved laugh, like someone finding the key in their own pocket after rummaging through the entire house. I, who had always sought lofty goals, realized that true greatness lay in fitting into the present with tenderness. The voice confirmed, "Great rivers spring from small streams." Still, the question persisted. What if I go back and get lost again? The light came close enough that I felt it breathe inside me. When you feel yourself getting lost, stop, breathe, call out to me. I'll be there in the space between two thoughts. Those words burned into my consciousness like unburning fire. I knew that when anxiety came, when the old urge to run aimlessly returned, I would have a place to land, the space of a breath. Then the presence offered me something I recognized as both a gift and a responsibility, a commitment. "Say it with me," it asked. And I said, not with a voice but with complete assent, "I will return to love better." The light nodded, "And I will be with you through every attempt." I felt a seal, a silent agreement between heaven and my will. It wasn't a contract of perfection. It was a pact of presence. In this pact, some words emerged as anchors: humility, listening, forgiveness, service, patience. I saw them as seeds, and I understood that my task would not be to plant them only in others, but first in myself every day. I realized the difference between saving and serving. Saving requires results. Serving requires presence. The voice explained, "You spent many years trying to prove your worth. Now, live to offer value." This simple reversal reoriented my axis. The post-NDE mission, the mission after death that didn't fully happen, was less about extraordinary feats and more about necessary gestures. Then a glow appeared at the edge of this golden space, like the harbinger of a border. I felt Earth's gravity resume its call, a reminder of weight, temperature, pain, and time. Fear returned in low waves, no longer paralyzing, merely human. "Will I forget all this?" I asked, desperate at the possibility of losing clarity. "You will forget the form," said the light, "but not the essence. I will remember you in the details." And I saw flashes of what these reminders would be. A ray of sunlight, piercing a curtain in the morning, the smell of coffee made by someone who loves me, the sincere laughter of a child in the hallway, a phrase from a stranger at the bus stop, the silence of an empty church at dusk. In these details, the voice promised to whisper, "I am still here." There was a final movement of tenderness, as if the very fabric of light embraced me, and the presence, with firm love, repeated what it had said before, but now as a command: "It is not yet your time." This time, it didn't sound like a refusal. It sounded like a command. I understood that not yet is a go, and that go is not go alone. I would return with a mission, a purpose, and an invisible companion. The border approached. I could feel the body in the distance, a dense outline waiting for me, and my tears of light mingled with an impossible desire to stay and return at the same time. "Trust," the voice said, for the third time, and something inside me responded with a new, small, honest courage. I trust. The brightness then, she began to dissolve into millions of points, like dust shimmering in the air, and each point seemed to carry an echo of the presence. I wanted to gather them all, like someone trying to carry the sea in their hands. I couldn't, and I realized I didn't need to. The sea was with me simply because I had touched its waters. Gravity increased, as if a magnet called me by the name that still echoed there. Ethan. It was time to cross. And as I fell back toward my body and the hospital, the voice left a final trace of guidance, short as a breath and vast as a sky. "When it hurts, love." These three words settled like constellations within me, ready to guide me through the dark alleys of return. I knew that when the pain arrived, physical, emotional, every day, I would have an unwavering answer: love. And it was with this sacred password that I crossed over, ready, still fragile, still afraid, to discover what heaven's loving refusal wanted to reveal in the world of clocks and postponed embraces, where the mission ceases to be poetry and becomes practice, step by step, day after day, in the precise rhythm of the not yet that becomes now. The light expanded in all directions, as if space itself were breathing. There was no longer a boundary between inside and outside, between me and infinity. It was all a single movement of love, a constant pulse that said, without words, that all existence was part of the same heart. And it was in that instant, between the echo of the not yet and the call to return, that something opened within me. It wasn't a voice this time, but a deep understanding, almost as if all of heaven spoke through a feeling. I realized I was being taught that this moment, the refusal to stay, wasn't punishment. It was pure love in the form of guidance. Heaven's refusal was God's way of saying, "You still have something that only you can offer." It was there that the revelations began to unfold. Three truths unfolded before me, not as lessons dictated by someone, but as memories the soul recognizes when it finally awakens. The first truth came like a wave of heat that enveloped me from head to toe. Life has a sacred time, not a time measured by clocks or calendars, but an invisible rhythm, a divine breath that guides each existence. I saw the thread of my life as a luminous tapestry, each thread a choice, each color an emotion. There were threads I believed lost, regrets, mistakes, decisions I called failures, but there I realized that none were. Outside the design, everything was part of a greater purpose, woven with a loving precision impossible to comprehend on earth. I saw that haste was the great enemy of the sacred. I saw how humans live rushing from one task to another, trying to advance time while heaven only asks, "Be present." The presence showed me that time is not something that passes, but something that happens inside us. When we are attentive, time expands. When we escape from ourselves, time contracts. And in that dimension, I realized that every second lived with love becomes eternal. The second truth revealed itself as a gentle force at the center of my being. The mission is always to serve and heal. I had spent years searching for a greater meaning, something that would prove my importance. But there, before the light, I understood that the true mission is simple, almost silent. To serve is not to nullify oneself, but to become a channel. To heal is not to save the other. It is to be whole enough that your presence reminds the other that they too can heal. The light showed me images of Earth, people walking the streets, tired faces, eyes looking down. And I realized that each person carries a pain the world doesn't see. The mission is to acknowledge this pain and respond with compassion, not judgment. Service is offering kindness where the human heart has learned to react hastily. It's listening before offering an opinion, embracing before explaining. I understood that the greatest prayer isn't said with words but with actions. When you help someone breathe again, you become a living prayer. The third truth arrived as a brightness so intense that I had to retreat into it. No one returns the same after touching the light. There's no way to go on living the same way when you sense what exists beyond the veil. It's like seeing the world on a different frequency. The softest tones, the smallest gestures, everything becomes meaningful. I knew that, upon returning, I would carry the memory of the light. In every look, in every breath. This revelation came with a certainty. Returning to life would be the greatest challenge, because after experiencing absolute love, everything on earth would seem small, limited, imperfect. But the light showed me that imperfection is the soil where love grows. Human life is a place of contrast. It is in the shadows that we learn to recognize clarity. It was then that I understood that paradise is not a distant place, but a state of perception. Heaven is not just where I've been. It is what I should take with me when I return. As these truths unfolded, I felt entire layers of fear melt away. The guilt that had plagued me for so many years was replaced by gratitude. I understood that even the suffering I'd experienced had shaped me to love more deeply. No tear had been wasted. Every hurt that had wounded me had opened space for more compassion. Suddenly the light began to pulse differently. It was as if it was saying to me, "Now you understand." I felt the energy shift. The love was still there, but there was a gentle movement, a kind of invitation to cross back over. And then I realized that the refusal to stay wasn't a no. It was a yes to something much greater. It was heaven saying, "You were touched by eternity to remind others that it exists." The words, "not yet," now had a different flavor. They weren't a limitation, they were an expansion. It was as if God himself was saying to me, "The time is mine, the mission is ours. Come back and live," like someone who has already seen it. Before the passage opened completely, something inside me asked once more, "Please let me remember." And the answer came tenderly. You will remember in your heart when you love. Every time you choose good, even without reason, you will feel me again. The light began to recede, and I felt the density of the body calling me. A subtle chill passed through my being, the memory of weight, of flesh, of time. But alongside this chill, a new heat ignited. The desire to fulfill, the will to serve, to make amends, to live differently. I took one last look at the golden space around me. It didn't disappear. It just grew more distant, like a horizon that recedes but never disappears. And before everything faded, I realized that the three truths I had received weren't just for me. They were for those who still live, for those who feel heavy-hearted and think heaven has forgotten. Heaven's refusal wasn't punishment. It was a loving reminder that life still has chapters to be written. A call to transform what remains of time into eternity lived. The glow faded, and the last thing I heard, not with my ears but with my soul, was a soft promise, almost a whisper. When it hurts, remember, love is the way back. And then I felt the ground of the world begin to call my name again. The return didn't happen suddenly. It was like falling in slow motion. The light around me receded, and the warmth of the presence began to transform into a gentle breeze. I felt the love still there, but now it was mixed with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Density. The weight of matter began to call me back, and it was as if the planet itself were pulling me inward. I tried to resist. The body down there seemed so small, so fragile, so human. The contrast was almost unbearable. A second before, I was pure consciousness. Light, infinite, made of light. Now I was being pushed into a tight space, full of limits, full of pain. I felt fear, not the ordinary. Fear of life, but the fear of forgetting everything I had just experienced. And it was in this fear that the voice returned, soft, almost maternal. Fear not. What is real is never lost. It only transforms. The words vibrated inside me as gravity tightened. I began to feel the air, first as a distant memory, then as something dense, cold. The light grew dimmer, and the sound, that breathing silence, was replaced by another kind of sound, confused, metallic, full of noise. It was the sound of machines. Suddenly a piercing pain shot through my chest. It was as if a lightning bolt had ripped through every cell, forcing them to awaken. My entire body convulsed. A shock of reality. I was returning, and for the first time, I realized how small the body is to contain a soul that has seen infinity. I gasped for air. The air rushed in like fire, burning my lungs. My eyes fluttered open, but the brightness blinded me. The same light that had once been love now hurt. I felt the cold touch of hands trying to keep me alive. The doctor's hurried voices, the insistent sound of machines restarting their work. Beep, 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 frantic. I was back, but it wasn't the same. I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come. Tears streamed down my face, unsure if they were from pain or gratitude. My body trembled as if trying to remember how to exist. I felt my heart pounding, a drum inside a fragile box, and even with all the pain, something inside me smiled, because I knew what had happened. And more importantly, I knew because had happened. The nurse looked at me in surprise as if she'd witnessed a miracle. I wanted to say, yes, I'm back, but I didn't need to. She held my hand, and in that touch I felt the same energy of light, as if a tiny spark of heaven had come with me and now manifested itself in the simplest human gestures. I remained silent for hours. My body ached. My mind wavered between confusion and lucidity, but my heart felt different. It was as if something had been reorganized within me. Every beat was a memory of what I saw. Every breath was a reminder of the promise, come back to love better. In the days that followed, as my body recovered, I realized my soul no longer wanted to rush. Everything seemed new. The smell of coffee, the distant sound of rain, the touch of light through the hospital window. Things that had previously gone unnoticed now seemed like everyday miracles. People came to visit me, and I saw in them a radiance I hadn't noticed before. A tired nurse, a worried doctor, a friend silent in the corner of a room. They were all reflections of the same light that had welcomed me. Heaven was there, disguised in human gestures. But along with this new realization came an unexpected weight, responsibility. I knew I couldn't waste the time I'd been given back. Life has sacred time. This phrase echoed in my mind constantly, and with it, the memory of the mission, serve and heal. But how? How can we serve when the world seems so distracted, so far from what is essential? The answer came simply, not as a grand revelation, but as a quiet thought. Start nearby. I started small. A sincere thank you to the doctor who held my hand, a smile to the waiter who brought the meals, a short message to the son I barely spoke to, I'm fine, I love you. The words were few, but they carried everything that heaven had taught me, and it was then that I realized something extraordinary. Every act of love rekindled within me, the memory of the light. The more I loved, the more I remembered who I was on that other side. Heaven was not distant. It was present in every human gesture born of compassion. Over the next few weeks, I began to dream of the light. Simple, wordless dreams, yet full of meaning. Sometimes it was just a golden field, sometimes a formless, smiling face. And always, upon waking, I felt the same impulse, live with purpose. Returning from heaven is like being reborn with a tired body, but with an awakened soul. Physical pain is the price of starting over, but the miracle is being able to feel. Every aching muscle reminded me that I was alive. Every tear that fell reconnected me to the promise, when it hurts, love. The hardest part was dealing with people's silence when I tried to tell them what I experienced. Many listened to me with respect, others with skepticism, and some just smiled with pity. But I didn't care. I knew the experience wasn't a story to convince. It was a message to share. The truth is, once you touch the eternal, the fear of death disappears. What remains is the fear of not living long enough before it arrives. So each dawn became a prayer. Every face that crossed my path, an opportunity to serve. I became more patient, more attentive, more human, and I realized that the true miracle is not dying and seeing the light. It is living and becoming part of it. One day, sitting at the hospital window, still recovering, I felt the wind touch my face. I closed my eyes and heard the voice now inside me saying again, "It's not your time yet." But this time I understood that this wasn't a wait. It was a mission in progress. From that moment on, I decided that every breath I took would be an act of gratitude, and every gesture a piece of the light that stayed with me. And that's why I'm here telling this story. Not to prove anything, but to remind us that heaven still speaks. And sometimes, he says not yet, just to teach us how to live better in the now. Perhaps as you hear my voice now, you're also wondering why you're still here. Maybe there's a part of you that feels the same way I did before I left, the silent weariness of someone who no longer understands the purpose of continuing. But if heaven still allowed you to breathe today, it is because there is something in you that the world still needs to see. God's not yet isn't always a refusal. Sometimes it's a reminder that there are people waiting for your love, even if you don't know them yet, that there are wounds in the world that only your hands can touch, that there are words that only your voice can speak. I discovered that life isn't about deserving or proving anything. It's about learning to give of yourself, even when your soul is tired. It's about understanding that each dawn is a chance to begin again, more consciously, more present, more whole. There are days when the pain weighs like a stone. There are days when everything seems too dark. But it was in the darkness that I saw the light. And perhaps it is in your darkness that your own light will be born. Maybe you haven't had a near-death experience, but you might be living a near life. Those moments when you survive, but don't truly live. I know how much it hurts. But if there's a pounding in your chest right now, there's also a mission pulsing alongside it. Purpose isn't a destination. It's a way of walking. It reveals itself when you do good, even when you're not seen, when you forgive even, when you don't hear excuses, when you choose to love even when you're afraid. Sometimes it manifests itself in something simple, a conversation, a kind word, a listening silence. It is in these small gestures that heaven hides. Maybe your mission isn't out there, but inside in the way you treat those around you. Maybe it's in a hug you've been avoiding, or a prayer you haven't said in a while. Life is a breath, but within that breath, there is eternity. Every breath is a piece of heaven trying to manifest through you. When I returned, I realized that meaning lies not in the answers, but in the questions that keep us human. Why me becomes, who can I be useful to? Until when becomes, what can I do with the time I have? And that's what I want you to take with you now. Not yet isn't a delay. It's a sacred space to discover what truly matters. So I invite you, from the bottom of my heart, to reflect, what do you believe heaven still wants to accomplish through you? Write this in 7 words. Not out of obligation, but as an act of surrender. 7 words that sum up your purpose, your calling, your desire to leave the world a little lighter than you found it. Because sometimes what heaven wants is exactly that. For you to discover that the miracle is not in the end of life, but in the simple fact of being alive now. And maybe when you write it down, you'll realize that the not yet that once frustrated you is actually God's most loving way of saying to you, I still need you here. Close your eyes for a moment. Breathe. Let the sound of your breathing remind you that you are still here, not by chance, not by luck, but by purpose. Lord of Light, at this moment I pray for whoever hears these words, for the one who carries a heavy heart but still chooses to believe, for those who feel they no longer have strength but still wake up each new day, for those who try to understand why heaven has not yet called him back. Lord, surround this person with the same light that surrounded me when I thought it was all over. Show her that not yet is also a form of love, that waiting, pain, and silence are places where your voice whispers deeper. May she understand that if she is still breathing, it is because your plan is still being written through her. Give this heart courage to continue, faith to not give up, and eyes to see the small miracles hidden in everyday life. May every tear shed become a seed of compassion, and may every open wound become the channel through which your love can pass. Lord, if anyone hears now and feels the weight of not knowing what to do, speak to that person's heart as you spoke to mine. It's not your time yet, but it also shows that this "not yet" means there is something sacred waiting to be born within you. May whoever listens now find the courage to get up tomorrow and choose to love again. May your spirit remind each one that their mission is not far away. It begins exactly where they are, in the look, in the word, in the forgiveness they have not yet given. And if for some reason someone who listens to me feels like they can't take it anymore, may this prayer be the reminder that heaven itself has prepared. You are still needed. There is still something beautiful waiting for you in this life. You didn't stay to suffer. You stayed to illuminate. Amen. Now, breathe again. Feel the air coming in. This is heaven telling you, not yet, but also telling you, I trust you. And before the music fades, I want to leave you with an invitation. If this story touched something in you, if in some way you felt the presence of the light during these words, so stay with me in the next video. There I will tell you about the night the light made me relive every tear I caused. The night heaven showed me what true love really means, not the love that only feels, but the love that repairs, that heals, and that transforms what we were. The episode is called The Night the Light Made Me Relive Every Tear I Caused. And in it you will understand what happens when heaven allows us to see the pain we leave in others, and how even that pain can turn into forgiveness. Get ready, the light continues, and what comes next is what really changes everything.